How are you getting on?
Uh, yeah, I mean it's been such a strange time, and we've as an office we've adapted remarkably well, I think, as everybody has done, to working remotely. It's going to
Mm,
have a huge impact on the way we work in the future, for sure.
yeah,
We're really kind of rethinking our office,
yeah,
um, and at the beginning, I felt completely overwhelmed by the kind of existential issues that this pandemic has raised.
mm,
Issues around race and inequality and environment, and it was, it is clear that we cannot return to normal, and without reflecting deeply on what's happened and reassessing our priorities and understanding our sense of purpose, um, and altering our behavior to become more participatory, more generous, more patient. Um,
so
uh,
true.
Really, there are many, many issues. And on there are aspects of this lockdown that I've actually I've enjoyed. I've enjoyed the slower pace.
Mm,
I've enjoyed not having to say yes to everything. I've
yeah,
enjoyed, in a way, I've enjoyed not traveling,
yes,
uh, and that makes you think about how we're going to live going forward.
it's interesting. It's absolutely existential, that's for sure. It made me reread the play Camus' book, which is a book on existentialism, and I was shocked to read, and it repeats a number of times in the book, the concern with flattening the curve in the isolated town in Algiers that the book's based in. So the language was sort of automatically familiar, but the repercussions are hard to gauge. Have you guys been working from home as we
Yes,
have? Yeah.
yeah.
Have you found that incredibly clunky like we have, or has that been okay for you?
So there are. It's mixed. In one way, it's, I think, heightened our sense of collaboration, because when you meet on a Zoom, it's
Mm,
very intense and it's very purposeful,
yeah,
because you have to cram everything into, it's more problematic when things overrun. You have to be um, more concise. As an office, we've met as a group every week at the end of the day on Friday for an office-wide conversation, often around a theme, and
yeah,
around the theme, what's the future going to be like for us? How are we going to contribute in a more meaningful way? And that's been really, we don't do that every week in that way in the office, and that,
mm.
in a sense, has brought us closer. But and I think it's the adversity that has brought us closer, because we're fighting a common enemy, if you like, and
So
it's
you
it's
guys have been doing it really tough over there. It's been tough in the UK. We've been getting off lightly here in Australia, but it's been brutal there and upsetting to watch from a distance and a safe distance, to see the lives lost and the big impact on the everyday there has been very sad to see. So it's no wonder it's galvanising for
mm,
you guys. It's been interesting. We've done the same. The clunkiness we found in our small office, so we have offices that are vastly different in size, is the loss of the 100 conversations in any given day about small things that are discussed, workshopped, resolved, and everything keeps moving. And those small moments in the day that are usually creative, even in the most banal issues, they're not there, and I find that's hard. the Zoom meetings with the services consultants are, you're right, they're intense. We have a thing where I'm glad to hear you're having Friday drinks with the office. We have a thing where we insist that all consultants in our consultant Zoom meetings stand up before the meeting to reveal what they're really wearing. and we did it, and a mechanical engineer was wearing a shirt and tie, stood up, and sure enough he was wearing shorts underneath the table. So we got him up.
Brilliant.
It's kind of important, isn't it, that we laugh through some of this stuff as well, or we'll all go crazy.
Yeah.
So
we have director meetings every day now, the four of us, and even if we've got nothing specific to talk about, and that's what you're kind of alluding to. And yes, what I really miss apart from the kind of joy of being with the team. Is that spontaneity and that sense that the conversation can lead anywhere.
Yeah.
Over the airwaves, it's less easy for it to meander. There's a kind of greater urgency. And
no, it's those bits that are the critical bits in any project. And they're unsung. Mm-hmm. All of us do them in all of our practices, but we assume that they'll happen and that they're normal, and that's what architects do. We encounter a problem, and it can be something completely boring, working our way through access detailing, is really, really hard yards, and it's excruciating at times. But there can be moments of creativity even in those things, and I miss those things. I definitely do. That, we in the office have a level of intensity that's not there through the Zoom, and it won't ever be. So I wonder, it's interesting. So we have to find a new office space where our lease is running out and we don't want to renew it. It's caused us to have that same conversation that you mentioned before, like what is the workplace going forward, and can we actually be operating out of a shed somewhere in the middle of the outback with all of our tech working and do it successfully? And maybe we can, I don't know. Don't know what the answer is yet. Everyone's still, the jury's out, but everyone's still contemplating alternatives at the moment.
I mean, we're having conversations about we work in a big shed. That's our place at the moment. But we're now having conversations about, reimagining the office as a family home and somewhere that you come to for specific meetings, specific workshops, maybe a month for a deadline on a project or a competition, but with the agility and the option to work from home while you're doing the kind of production, as it were.
Yeah.
It's going to be very different, and I think that one of the things that I've enjoyed, and I think a lot of people enjoyed, or that it's really important that to acknowledge that it's been very different for different people. So people with young kids, it's been a nightmare.
Really hard.
To juggle working and childcare. I mean, really, and homeschooling at the same time. And then there are other people who, I'm incredibly fortunate. I've got a lovely house, but other people who live in a very small space and for whom, coming to the office is a really nice change of scene. So actually we opened our office last week for those people who would just like a change of scene, see a few people, in this huge shed we've got, 5 or 6 people rattling around, but it's nice to get a change of scene. It's
so important, and you're absolutely right. For some of us who are spoilt, we can survive comfortably. I've thought at different times of making my home the office and building myself another home, because it's a perfect office space.
Yeah.
And it's tempting to contemplate, because we don't need as many meetings as we all thought we did. We do need the social interaction, especially in creative fields. But there are ways of achieving that. So it's a really fascinating problem. But talking with others about the current problem, the other problem that we have all been embracing as a profession that has now been forgotten, although I saw an Architects Journal article overnight that was interesting, is climate. And before the pandemic hit here, we were being burnt to the ground. You know, we were getting burnt out by bushfires like we've never seen before. And everyone was talking about climate. And AJ have just released a review of practices in the UK who signed up for Architects Declare to see how much post-occupancy analysis has gone on with buildings. And I'm worried that we get so distracted by the coronavirus that we forget that that's a major problem that we've got to try to deal with.
And that's our ongoing pandemic, if you like. I mean, that is
Right.
not going away anytime soon. But I think that, you know, that it has also shown the kind of importance of nature in a really profound way, whether it's just finding that little patch of sunlight on your front steps, or being in a garden or a park or a square with trees and smelling the roses.
Yeah.
It gives such huge pleasure. It's so nourishing. It's so life affirming. And this sense that we must leave the world nourished, not depleted. You know, we have got to change. We've got to change our behavior, and we've got to change the way we design, and we've got to do it urgently. You know, this is
it's urgent. It's absolutely, and it's profoundly important, because what our children's children inherit at the end of this century may or may not be disastrous, depending on what we all do now. And the challenge for architects always is we can dream of making things better. We need to bring our clients and our community along with us, so that they're prepared to spend the money required to make what we design as green as possible and as intelligent as possible in terms of the climate. And I know you guys do that, and we do it, and a lot of practices do it. But it's the other. It's getting someone. You know, we just had a client pull all the solar panels off a project that's on site at the moment.
Oh.
Not literally pull them off, but pull them out of the construction budget, because they just wanted to save. You know, it was about $30,000. It would have been running their building as a green building and almost off grid, and it's so short-sighted, and we just couldn't prevent it. So architects are part of the potential solution, but not all of it.
No, I mean, everybody has to play their part, and I think we have to not just kind of redesign the way we design, but redesign the way we think, redesign our kind of the systems, the regulatory systems, and work more closely with politicians, regulators, developers to change the framework.
Yeah,
it's true. Right, within a different framework if we're going to affect radical change.
How's the summer there? What part of London are you in? Where do you live?
North London.
So Islington. Camden Town around there.
No, Islington.
Islington, lovely.
Yeah, but just north of King's Cross.
And despite all the misery and all the rubbish that we've got to deal with, is it a nice summer? Are you getting some sunny days?
Yeah, we had an amazing kind of late spring, probably the warmest spring we've ever had.
Yeah.
And this week's been pretty rubbish, but the few weeks before that have been really glorious, and next week's going to be glorious. So we've been, you know, that has made a huge difference. And of course, I mean, now things are slowly getting back and the volume of traffic is increasing, but there was this moment where there was no traffic on the streets, and the heightened sense of birdsong and the smell of flowers and the air, it was palpable that the air was cleaner.
Yeah.
It has just been magical.
It must also be slightly spooky to have empty London streets, because it's always buzzing in London. Everything's going all the time. So to have that not closed down completely, but quietened down must have been a bit strange.
It was absolutely extraordinary, and you can just walk in the road, so you can get the whole kind of vista.
Yes.
We're very, London is a very green city. There's barely a street that doesn't have trees, and you often get, a kind of perspective of trees, but you only really get the full impact of that if you walk down the middle of the road, and that's been
lovely. Yeah,
really
I watched. Forgive me for being completely geeky, but because when I lived in London, I lived in Notting Hill, and I watched that movie Notting Hill the other night, where they go into the garden, and I had a girlfriend whose house backed onto the same garden, and we used to spend a lot of time in there, and it's such a beautiful part of London, and the vision of the planners who came up with those terrace houses backing onto a communal garden is just lovely. It's such a beautiful model for how we could make our cities.
It's one of the it's one of the best urban models, and it's also there's huge density.
Yeah, they're 4 stories high, those houses. They've got basements and 4 levels, and they're fantastic.
It's a really fabulous model. I don't know.
Yeah, and the stoicism that I'm seeing in news reports from you guys is incredible. And David Ajay is curating the summer exhibition at the Royal Academy this year, and he's a friend, and he asked me would I put something into the exhibition, which is now deferred to now be the autumn exhibition. And talking to someone from the Royal Academy who's part of the organisation committee, I said to him, that I read online where that exhibition's been going non-stop since 1762. That means it's survived the Napoleonic War, the 2 world wars. And he sort of just smiled and said, "Oh yes, no, we'll get there. We're just being held up a little bit because the museum's actually closed right now." I just thought that was just fabulous. I really enjoyed that. It was just like, good on you. You're just going to keep going regardless. And I think we all probably need to be that way. It's a bit scary in America now. I'm worried about all my American colleagues. The numbers just keep climbing there. The complexity here with our Indigenous population is now highlighted by all those events in America, and we have a bad track record here. But we're talking, and if any good comes out of those things, it's that the debate is really on the front page every day and being scrutinised, which is great. So, there's silver lining there.
I hope that it is unstoppable now, but what we need is, fine debate, but then action. It's an action that is not just symbolic, action that is really structural. Action that's
absolutely, that's structural, and that doesn't necessarily have fanfare and headlines associated with, just quiet, stoicism, just quietly getting things right and making them permanently right. And you can add into that all of the equity debates that again have been pushed to one side. Equity in our profession is so important, both in terms of race and opportunities and gender, and we just need to keep going quietly, working away to get those things right. And the adjustments are small, but they're important. And just like climate, it's just important that we just keep going with and don't lose sight of those things. Where I did an interview with a journal in the UK last week on homelessness, which is another potential fallout from this thing. And we've got a terrible homelessness problem here in Melbourne, and it's become worse and worse since you were here, even with your project. And when I was last in London, I stayed at the Soho Hotel, and I went for my morning run down Piccadilly to Green Park, and I couldn't believe how many homeless people were on the streets around Soho. And I worry that will get worse and not better in the back end of this thing that we're dealing with. And that's a real issue, and that's a potential issue that architects can have a voice in as well.
Huge issue.
And sad. It's sad to see. And we're affluent countries.
Oh, just wrong.
It's just wrong, isn't it? I find it upsetting. When I lived in Notting Hill all those years ago, I used to go to the Notting Hill Gate tube station to get into Dennis Lasdon's office, and in winter the steps down to the tube station were literally full of people who were trying to get some shelter. And when it's cold in London in winter, I don't need to tell you, it's hard. And it gets cold here too. And I just can't understand how people can survive that. It's really disturbing to see. And I think it'll be profound. I think people will be pushed out onto the street just because of the loss of income and loss of home and lack of alternative accommodation for both you guys and us. It's a concern. So we need to keep banging those drums, don't we, and keep people's attention focused on all those things. Patronage in architecture is so important, and historically so. You know, we wouldn't have had Michelangelo and Leonardo bumping into each other in the streets of Florence, both working for the Medicis. You know, we wouldn't have had the work that they produced. Like the courage of patronage is never overstated, because it's an investment and a leap of faith. And Naomi's done that better than most, and hopefully she continues to do it. And we're the beneficiaries, and then the broader community benefits. And that's the magic of that commission, that it doesn't get packed away, and it doesn't go into private hands, except for mine. Quasi-private. It goes into the public realm, and that's fantastic as well. And that is an incredibly generous act. And architects need to promote those things, not simply the MPavilion, but all projects that involve a potential commission of our services and our creativity, because it enriches culture of the community, and in the case of Australia, it exposes people to the possibility of architecture where, in a young country, it's not firmly established yet as culturally important. Mm-hmm. So, you know, London's got 1,000 years of architecture, and key moments in the history of architecture have occurred in London. We don't have that in Melbourne, where it's still a new city, and yes, an affluent city, and yes, a city with great possibilities, but also without a real understanding of the importance of what you just described beautifully before, and that is what can happen when a piece of architecture is commissioned, constructed, looked after, and gifted. That's a spectacular thing to have happen, and we're lucky to get involved in it.
That would be the perfect note to end the conversation. As a
and absolutely
thank you to Naomi, and it's so nice to chat to you, Sean. And never come to London without looking me up.
Well,
okay?
Well, likewise. And now you can go and do a hard day's work, and I can have a nice cold beer, because it's the end of the day here.
Okay.
Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you.